Protect your DNA. BioPQQ can promote formation of new mitochondria. Infowarsstore.com.
Well, this weekend, it looks like the real heroes of liberty were in Greece. These people, in the spirit of Thermopylae, stood up to the banksters and said, Molon, Labe, to the money changers who wanted to take over their country. Take a look at this cartoon. I think it says a lot. You see animals with flags of every one of the European nations running over a cliff called Austerity, except for one. That one is wearing the flag of Greece. It's running away from the cliff. But of course, those who are running over it say, there's always one idiot. No, they're not. They knew exactly what they're doing. Greece votes no. The European Union is dying before our eyes. This is an op-ed piece from Nigel Farage, who has made a very good career out of the UK Independence Party opposing the European Union and its technocratic dictatorship, which is what they were trying to impose upon Greece. This is what he had to say. He said, despite the scaremongering and the bullying from those in Brussels, we are waking today with Greece having delivered a resounding no. That comes despite EU bosses saying it would mean a Greek exit from the euro, not to mention the heavy economic pressure placed upon the Greek people to go along with the wishes of Brussels. It is a crushing defeat for those Eurocrats who believe that you can simply bulldoze public opinion. And he points out there's a bigger picture to consider, a demographic picture, he says. There's a huge generational dynamic existing in this, running through all this. He says, one poll from an agency in Greece found that 67% of Greeks under the age of 35 voted no, which shows just how much the seismic plates are shifting within European politics. But then he talks about how the result is a tired, stumbling European Union that is dying on its feet before your very eyes. Will it, however, be replaced by some larger economic union, the TTIP perhaps, the Transatlantic Investment Partnership? Remember last week, as this was running up, the USA Today opinion, the op-ed piece, said, we think that Greece should say no. They should go their own way. They should be their own people. But they had a very interesting sentence that I think stood out amongst the rest. They didn't really go into it in a lot of detail, but they said the answer lies in the peculiar collection of nations known as the Eurozone. These countries share a monetary system, but not a political one, which is a recipe for trouble. You see, you cannot, and the core truth of this, they really didn't explore because they don't want to get into how the Trans-Pacific and the Transatlantic partnerships are fundamentally about our sovereignty, as was the European Union. And I should say is, because it is far from finished, but there are a lot of people who are pushing to get out of it. It's fundamentally not just an economic union. Remember that the EU began as a trade agreement and then progressed on to something that was far more tightly integrated than to a financial currency. They're now using this economic crisis to try to push them into a political union where they devolve sovereignty, where they give it up to Brussels, to the European Union. That has always been the design from the very beginning. They're not using a crisis, they're creating this crisis. This was the design from the very beginning. And nationalist groups like UKIP, like Le Pen's party in France, many people are starting to see this design, and many people are waking up, especially generationally. Typical of the way the Greek people have been represented in the press, especially the British press. They're called big, fat, lazy, references to the big, fat Greek wedding. Here's this one from the Telegraph. They say the Greek government's monthly salary and pensions bill is the equivalent of buying 548 Bugatti Veyrons every month. Guess what? The Greek people aren't getting Bugatti Veyrons every month. We're talking about pensioners who are having their promises broken, that were given promises through their working life. You know who's buying the Bugatti Veyrons, of course? That's Goldman Sachs. Look at this article today on Infowars.com. The Troika swindle. Greeks owe nothing. 245 billion euros of the debt was fraudulently dumped on the country. He points out, and remember, it was just a couple of weeks ago that the committee in Greece said that this debt is illegal, illegitimate, and odious. And that's a particular legal phrase, odious, meaning that it was not legitimate. They point out that this was dumped on them as a result of the financial bailouts of banks in Europe. The debt was taken by the sovereign countries in Europe, and 245 of the 323 billion euro debt is debt owed to the banks. That was bailed out of the banks. So they give that money to the banks to keep them floating, And then what they say is, oh, now it looks like you've got too much on your balance sheet, so we're going to have to raise your interest rates. They're saying you've got 180% debt to GDP ratio. No, actually, if you look at this, they really only have 78% actual debt to GDP ratio. Remember, this committee a couple of weeks ago in Greece said that the debt was illegal, illegitimate, and odious. Why is it illegitimate and odious? Because it was fraudulently dumped on the Greek people. 245 billion out of the 323 billion. In other words, 76% of the debt was given to banks. And of course, that money did not stay in Greece. It went to JP Morgan Chase. It went to HSBC. And of course, one of the biggest beneficiaries, Goldman Sachs. Now they say your credit rating is lower. You need to pay a higher interest rate. You need to pay this back, and we're going to cut off your cash. The Greek people said, we're not taking this anymore. They said resoundingly no. What would the people of America do? Leanne McAdoo went to the streets of Austin and asked the people, of course, we know that Americans are exceptional. Nothing bad like this can ever happen in America, but what if it did? This is what they had to say.
What do you think about what's going on in Greece? Do you think something like that could happen here?
Well, of course, it's happening in Puerto Rico. That's kind of here.
Yeah.
So, yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. I mean, especially with the IMF, the way they handle things, I think it's very possible.
How would you feel if the banks were shut down here for a week and you could only take out about $60 a day?
I think most people would be panicked. I would try to plan for something like that, but I think a lot of people would panic.
I'd be pissed off.
That is a very good question. What would we all do?
How would your business survive or thrive if people weren't able to get cash out of the bank?
Well, I personally think that it's a real tragedy that you would have a country that would go bankrupt that once had money and now don't have any money. But a business like mine would just die there.
And bless our heart, we're a generous people, and we want to make sure that our citizens are happy. But there's a warning out there someplace that, you know, there is a limit on how much money you can borrow and still pay it back on time.
Right.
And as far as I know, you can't borrow money without paying interest on it.
Yeah. Well, unless you're a bank. They're going to start looking at ways to kind of pay the banks, keep them solvent, which will be taking 30%, a little haircut out of people's savings accounts. Anyone who has about 8,000 euros in their account. Should it be okay giving a little haircut to the banks?
It doesn't sound right, because that's the money that I've saved.
I don't have a savings account. I keep my money at home.
Would you be okay pushing back your retirement so that the banks could get paid, even though it was the banks that were doing the risky trading and everything?
I wouldn't have a whole lot to give, but whatever they take, that I wouldn't be very cool about it. Yeah, exactly.
They may need to take some austerity measures. Which ones and at what level, it's way beyond me to know.
Do you think that the Greek people are just greedy because they're just addicted to all this welfare that's been coming their way, or do you think it's the banks that are being greedy?
Well, if the Greek people are countries who are controlled, I call it aristocracy, not a democracy, that's owned by the bank. So they don't really have any options.
I don't know that much about it, but I know if you borrow money, you ought to pay it back.
Do you give one of our 50 states a credit card and they default on it, so the rest of the states have to suffer it?
I think we should leave them on their own. They've been spending recklessly for years, and now it's got them.
I tend to err on the side of kindness and let's help a brother out, but this is not the first time they've been in this situation either.
It wasn't actually the Greeks taking...
Who borrowed the money and who got the benefit of the borrowed money? It's the people with the pension, the government employees, all benefited from that borrowed money. That's how they got paid what they got. That's how they got the pensions they got. And so they are the benefactors of the borrowed money.
A bailout might bring restrictions that they don't want. It's going to be back in the same position they were.
Right.
But on the other hand, if it causes the entire world stage to start to fall, yeah. Is it best for them? Maybe not.
The government borrowed the money on their behalf. They were the beneficiaries. You can't borrow money and get all the advantages of that borrowed money and not pay it back.
So you're telling me that you can make me hungry, but the government is okay because they own the company. Well, that's not right.
Yeah.
That's communism.
They do not get a free lunch.
I couldn't figure out how they would allow themselves to go bankrupt because they would go broke. And usually they're too greedy to go broke, but I can go broke if somebody else is paying for it.
There will be some pain involved.
I want to make this announcement now. It's going up as we speak, a day early.
To celebrate the birth of our country and give a big thanks to all the info warriors out there, we are now offering free shipping on every item shipped out of the InfowarsStore.com warehouse. That's free shipping on all t-shirts, books, and DVDs. Free shipping on Molon, Labe, and 1776 belt buckles, which are also 25% off while supplies last. Free shipping on all of our InfowarsLife.com nutraceuticals. If it's in the InfowarsStore.com warehouse, it's shipping for free, all during the month of July. It's our way of saying thanks to the true heart and soul of this operation, who stand beside us and support us as we wage an info war for liberty and freedom for all. InfowarsStore.com, free shipping for the month of July.